In the autumn of 1939, Europe once again plunged into a Great War. The Second World War began with Germany's attack on Poland. According to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Poland was divided between Hitler and Stalin. For the Kremlin, this was only the beginning. Next on its list was Finland. The Soviet leadership demanded that Helsinki hand over the Karelian Isthmus, the islands in the Gulf of Finland, and allow the establishment of Soviet bases. For the Finns, this meant de facto loss of independence. They refused. To justify the attack, Moscow organized a provocation. On November 26, Soviet artillery shelled its own positions near the village of Manila. Several Soviet soldiers were killed. The Kremlin blamed the Finns and declared it an act of aggression. The Finnish side even proposed an international investigation, but the USSR rejected it. It was a classic setup, and it became the pretext of war. In 2022, Russia acted in a similar way, inventing a genocide in Donbass and staging fake shellings of its own territory to create an excuse for aggression against Ukraine. On November 30, Soviet aircraft bombed Helsinki and other cities. Hundreds of civilians were killed. At the same time, the USSR created a puppet People's Government of Finland in Karelia, led by the communist Otto Kuusinen. Propaganda claimed that the Red Army was liberating the Finnish people from the bourgeoisie. In reality, it was a blatant act of aggression and an attempt of occupation. Finland had only about 3.5 million people, and its army was small, but the main defensive line on the Karelian Isthmus, the Mannerheim Line, became the key to the resistance. It consisted of fortified bunkers, concrete pillboxes, minefields and trenches that was made full use of the natural landscape. The Red Army launched assaults with hundreds of tanks and tens of thousands of soldiers, but met fierce resistance. Soviet attacks were often poorly prepared, carried out head-on, and suffered enormous losses. In the first months, Soviet soldiers didn't even have white camouflage suits. They marched in green uniforms across the snow, becoming easy targets. The Finns fought differently. Small ski units moved quickly through the forests, attacked Soviet columns, and disappeared again. They knew every path and used the harsh winter climate to their advantage. Sometimes Soviet units ended up surrounded. The Finns called these encroachments motti. The trapped Soviet forces were cut into smaller groups and gradually destroyed. One man became a legend. The Finnish sniper Simo Häyhä, whom Soviet soldiers nicknamed the White Death. In just a few months of war, he eliminated over 500 enemies. Häyhä used only iron sights without a scope to avoid reflections that could reveal his position. His skill, patience, and calm under pressure made him a national hero. In March 1940, he was seriously wounded but survived, living a long life and becoming one of the most famous snipers in history. Another symbol of the war became the Molotov cocktail. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov called the Soviet bombings bread deliveries to the hungry Finns. The Finns answered with sarcasm: if Molotov is handing out bread, they will serve him a cocktail to go with it. Improvised petrol bombs, glass bottles filled with fuel and a fuse, proved a formidable weapon against Soviet tanks. Although Finland fought alone, it gained widespread sympathy from around the world. European newspapers called the Finns the Little David against the Soviet Goliath. In December 1939, the USSR was expelled from the League of Nations, an unprecedented step at the time. Humanitarian aid, weapons, and even volunteers arrived in Finland from Sweden, Norway, Hungary, and the United States. At the same time, Western powers hesitated to intervene directly. France and Britain considered launching an operation through northern Norway, but the plan was eventually abandoned. Despite the heavy losses, Stalin did not abandon his plans. He replaced his generals and launched a new offensive supported by massive artillery, barrages, and air bombardments. The Finns fought heroically, but the balance of power was overwhelmingly against them. The government of Helsinki understood that without direct Western intervention, the war could not continue for much longer. After 105 days of war, Finland was forced to sign a peace treaty. It lost 11% of its territory, including the Karelian Isthmus, the shores of Lake Ladoga and parts of Lapland.
Around 400,000 Finns became refugees, leaving their homes behind. Yet, the most important thing was that Finland preserved its independence. The Soviet Union suffered enormous losses, over 120,000 soldiers killed, though official Soviet figures were much lower. The Red Army's weakness during the Winter War was one of the factors that convinced Hitler to attack the Soviet Union in 1949. Finnish commander-in-chief and later President Carl Gustav Emil Mannerheim described it as a moral victory over a giant. The Soviet Union learned that even a small nation can resist if its people stand behind their army. A year later, with the German invasion of the USSR, the continuation war began, as Finland sought to reclaim its lost territories. The memory of the Winter War lives on to this day. When Russia once again attacked its neighbor, this time Ukraine, many Finns remember the same winter of 1939. The same unjust war, the same struggle for freedom. Ukraine!